Good morning. This is the Ancient Medieval History Lecture for Wednesday, the 16th of February, 2022. And we have just gone over the Synoptic Gospels, recounting of the trial of Jesus before Roman Governor Pontius Pilate. And I think what I'm going to do before I have you read various translations of the Gospel of John, Kit's version of this into English, is to talk a little bit about who Pilate was. Pontius Pilate was not the first, I think it was the second or the third Roman governor of Judea. Now, under Augustus, the Romans didn't rule Judea directly. They had King Herod the Great. He was a buffer. The Jews, which were notoriously a difficult people to rule, would have their problems with King Herod, and King Herod would make things right as far as the Romans were concerned. This was all about allowing the Romans to get the benefits of rule without having to put up with the nonsense. But when Herod the Great dies, his son Archelaus is given Judea, which is southern Israel and Jerusalem. And Archelaus turns out to be an unmitigated disaster. So the Romans replace him directly. They don't put another puppet king up. They decide, okay, we're coming in. But immediately there are problems, because the Jews, even though they're not in a position to fight Rome in open battle, do not want to compromise with pagans. And they still remember Pompey turning the Holy of Holies into a stable. They're not great fans of Rome as a rule. So a series of Roman administrators comes in, and they each learn to compromise to a degree with the Jews in order to have peace. Because what the emperor wants, whether it's Augustus or Tiberius, he wants his money, taxes. He wants his troops not wasted on a bunch of rebels. He wants peace, and he wants prosperity, and he wants law and order. And if the governor can give that, the governor's okay. So Pilate comes in as a seasoned administrator. He is procurator of Judea, which is basically the Roman governor of that region. Judea is a part of Syria, which is the big overall province. And from AD 26 to 36, Pilate's in charge. Now, the Emperor Tiberius, the second Roman emperor, appointed Pilate, and 10 years later he recalls Pilate. Now, Josephus, who's a Jew who fights the Romans and then joins the Romans and becomes the great historian of the Jews to the Romans, he writes a book called Antiquities of the Jews, where Josephus explains Jewish history in Latin to the Romans. What is going on? I see giggles, smiles, happy, happy, happy. Whatever it is, either tell me or stop. Do I have a giant bird on my head? Is that?
Oh my gosh, you do!
I know. It's Polly.
You should probably leave school. It might attack us.
Yeah. That's why I brought it. In case you step out of line. Okay. Really, whatever it is. So, yeah. Josephus also writes a book called The Jewish War. He's a Jew. Obviously, he's writing for a Roman audience because they only have one Jewish war, whereas in his ancestry, all wars are Jewish wars because he's Jewish. So Josephus, who's a well-known historian, makes references to Pontius Pilate in his works. And Philo of Alexandria also makes references to Pontius Pilate. So Pilate developed a bit of a reputation. Now, Pilate decides to make a strong first impression on these stiff-necked Jews. His predecessor, I think his name was Gratus, had agreed that Rome's 10th Legion Fretensis, which occupied Judea, would not march with its eagle standards into Jerusalem, because the eagle standards were considered to be gods by the Roman soldiers. Marching around the city of God, Jerusalem, with a bunch of pagan gods is provocative and will cause riots. So Pilate's predecessor agrees on something that's practical. When the legions approach, they will ship their standards, or they'll take the eagles off their standards, so they'll have the name of the legion, tens for tenses, but it won't have the eagles. Pilate decides on his first day, that's stupid. That shows weakness. We're going to show the Jews who's boss. Rome over Jews. So, Pilate marches into Jerusalem and has a big parade with the eagles on the standards, and it does make an impression on the Jews. They decide, A, he's obnoxious, and B, he's an idiot. This is not really the kind of thing a seasoned Roman administrator should do. It's prideful, it's brittle. And the Jews end up taking against him. Now, on one occasion, Pilate tries to do something good for Jerusalem. He's a Roman governor, and so he's going to build a new aqueduct to the city of Jerusalem. Now, the thing about Judea is it's in the desert. It's in a dry region of the world. And if you're in the hot area that's dry, you sweat. So there are a couple of things that everyone needs when they're in the desert. They need sufficient salt as part of their diet, or they need to take supplemental salt tablets, because when you sweat, you're emitting salt, and you need to drink a bunch of water, because water is what we're mostly made of. We are ugly bags of mostly water. That is what human beings are. Except for the driest part of our bones, everything else about us is infused with water. If we don't keep that reserve up, we suffer and die. So Pilate wants to build a new aqueduct, which is a water road, basically an above-the-surface pipe, from a water source somewhere, probably in the Golan Heights, or the Jordan River, to Jerusalem. But he decides he doesn't want to pay for it. Not out of his budget. The Jews should pay for it. After all, Jews mostly are the people who live in Jerusalem. Where do the Jews keep a lot of their money? I know, the temple. So Pilate confiscates a bunch of temple money to build the aqueduct. From a Roman standpoint, that makes total sense. Roman temples contribute to patriotic projects all the time. Why shouldn't the Jewish temple? But of course, the Jews who were already unhappy with Pilate, the temple priests, the Sanhedrin in particular, go apoplectic over this. They're taking money from God, and they're building a pipe? Ah! So the anger at Pilate gets more and more frenzied. But that's not all. The other thing that Pilate's predecessor had done to placate tetchy Jewish leaders was that shields of the 10th Legion Fretenses, which occupies Judea, are not going to bear any imperial image. However, Pilate, like with the eagles, decides, darn it, Tiberius is the emperor. Tiberius is like a god out here. Tiberius, his face should be on the shields of our soldiers. So he has the soldiers put the emperor's image back on the shields. The response at this point of the Jewish people in Jerusalem is to riot. Violent riots that go on and on. Now, this does not look good. And a number of Jews who are Roman citizens, and therefore who have access to at least communicate with the emperor by letter, write to the emperor saying, your boy is screwing up. He's making a bunch of ham-fisted decisions. It's prideful, and it's causing needless problems. We want peace and law and order too, and we want to pay our taxes without too much trouble. So these guys tattle on Pilate. And Pilate gets a rebuke from the Emperor Tiberius saying, take the stuff off the shields and stop messing around. Just govern the province peacefully. Stop trying to prove points. And Tiberius does this pretty publicly. So the people that tattled on Pilate know that they got away with something, and Pilate is publicly humiliated. On at least 2 occasions, when faced by relatively peaceful protests, Pilate sends in the legions to kill and knock heads. Now, as you will probably observe in Canada, that's not a sign of strength. When the government meets people waving signs and chanting slogans with truncheons, that's clubs, and naked force, it looks bad, and it makes more people angry. So Pilate has not had a good record. Now, where things are going to go after Jesus' time is that 2 years after Jesus is executed in AD 35, Pilate is faced with a bunch of Samaritans who go protesting. These are sort of Jews according to the Samaritans, but not Jews according to other Jews. And Pilate decides he's going to, again, send in the legions, and he's going to violently suppress. In fact, he's going to massacre the protesters. Show these damn protesters. Send in the legions with naked steel. It'll show them who's boss. I'm dying. I can't really learn the lesson you want me to learn because I'm dead. So, this is really bad. So Pilate is recalled by Tiberius after slaughtering the Samaritans. He is fired and sent to Rome to be judged by Tiberius as an incompetent. And the thing about Tiberius in his old age is he's not a forgiving sort of man. He actually is kind of really quite amazingly vicious. But luckily for Pilate, Tiberius dies before he judges Pilate. So Pilate's case sort of slips through the cracks, and there are a bunch of legends about Pilate in later life, that he and his wife became Christians, that they ended up... Pilate's actually a saint in the Coptic Church of Ethiopia, as a person who changed and became a Christian near the end of his life and did useful things for the faith. I don't know. I do know this. Pilate allowed himself to become blackmailable. Blackmail is when you threaten somebody with information that will embarrass or ruin them in return for money or favors. Blackmail is nasty. It's also a crime. But by allowing himself to get into these controversies with the Jews over symbolism, and by then making Tiberius so irritated that Tiberius spanks his own governor in public, Pilate is in a position of weakness. And the Jewish leaders know this. This is all background to what's going to happen with Jesus. Pilate feels weak. He feels blackmailable. The crowds and the leaders of the Jews have dirt on him. If he continues having violent conflicts with the Jews, he's going to get fired, and he knows it. He doesn't want to get fired. He wants to keep his job, and he wants to get promoted. So, if Pilate seems weak, if he seems to be trying to evade responsibility, it's because he is weak, and he is trying to evade responsibility. The thing about being a leader, though, the thing you really should understand, is that being a leader involves taking responsibility, not evading it. It involves making difficult decisions, not avoiding them. It involves doing the right thing, even when it's difficult, for the sake of your people, for the sake of anyone under your authority. So, now we're going to look at John from the New Revised Standard Version. So we're on the page that begins with a 28 on the upper left. And there's a 19 at the top of the second column. I'm going to read the section from verse 32 all the way because there's a bunch of smeared words from the way I copied it. So would somebody like to read the first section up to verse 32? Thanks, Dan.
I'll read it long because it's short and I don't want to have to read a long one.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I make no promises. Go.
Then they took Jesus from
Caiaphas
to Pilate's headquarters. It was early in the morning. They themselves did not enter the headquarters so as to avoid ritual defilement and to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate went out to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered, "If this were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him according to your law." The Jews replied, "We are not permitted to put anyone to death."
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Caiaphas, I suppose I should do a basic summary. I did one back when we did the backgrounds of 9/11, but I suppose I should. So I should have done this before I asked Dan to read, but Dan read, so now he doesn't have to read again for a little while at least. Jesus' ministry comes at a time when Judea is like a barn full of dry hay after months of no rain, and there's a lightning storm. That is a high risk of explosive combustion. Okay? The fire is just waiting to break out and consume everything in and near that barn. The Romans are ruling the Jews. Now, there are a few Jews called Sadducees who go along with the Romans. They're practical people. Sadducees do not believe in an afterlife. Sadducees include Matthew, the tax collector, one of Jesus' followers. Before becoming a follower of Jesus, Matthew was a Sadducee. Sadducees are the Jewish people who do business with the Romans, who collaborate with them, who work with them, because they think that Rome is good for Judea, and in many ways it is. They also think that whether Rome is good or bad, Rome is the power. And if you want to have a good, decent life, you've got to compromise with the power. So there are the Sadducees who go along with this. That's one group. You should write this down like a teacher would, like a teacher on the board. So we got Sadducees. C-E-E-S. These are the collaborators. You may want to write this down. Then you've got their opposite. Their opposite are the Zealots. Now, the Zealots, writing this down is not a bad idea because they're kind of going to be on the test.
Oh, no.
The Zealots are anti-Roman Jewish revolutionaries. So, who are the people fighting the Romans in the streets? Who are the people killing Romans in the alleys? Who are the people stealing Roman payrolls and making it difficult for anyone who works with them? Who are the people killing Sadducees? They are the Zealots. The Zealots are anti-Roman Jewish terrorists. They believe themselves to be Latter-day Maccabees, and what they're going to do is they're going to free Judea from the Romans by force. And 30 years after Christ, they're actually going to lead an armed rebellion. Then you've got the Sanhedrin. S-A-N-H-E-D-R-I-N. Sanhedrin. S-A-N-H-E-D-R-I-N. And the Sanhedrin are the temple priests of the Jews. The Sanhedrin are the leadership of the Jewish priesthood, and therefore the leadership of the Jewish people. The Sanhedrin are the senior rabbinical scholars, and they are the temple priests of the house of Levi who slaughter the animals and take part in temple rituals. These guys, aside from any Jewish royalty, are the most important Jews. They are the temple priests. And in the time of Christ, there are two members of the Sanhedrin that are very important. There's Annas, Annas, and there's Caiaphas, Caiaphas. Now, Annas is the old leader of the priests, and he stepped down into semi-retirement, but he still basically runs things. Caiaphas is the official high priest at the time of Jesus. And it's Caiaphas who's going to lead the trial against Jesus the night he's arrested. And you got another group. This just keeps going and going. You've got the Pharisees, Pharisees. Oh, there may be an A. Now I got to check the spelling. Pharisees. Come on, let me do it. Oh, that's nice. Phar. Yes, I'm talking to the computer. That's right, I do that. Often I yell at the computer. Sometimes I say things I would not say in front of the class to the computer. It is with mine.
Oh, I do that too.
Okay. So, who are the Pharisees? Do any of you know enough Roman history to know what a Vestal Virgin is?
Maybe.
What is one? Yeah, they kept the flame at the temple of Hestia, and while they were priestesses of Hestia, they saw no men. They were celibate. And if a Vestal Virgin was ever uncelibate, that would be a curse to Rome, and it would mean they'd lose a war or something. It was really bad. Now, they weren't Vestal Virgins for their entire lives, because that's just crazy. So they would be a Vestal Virgin for most of them, at least, for a period of time, 5 years, 10 years, whatever. Yeah.
They saw somebody while they were Vestal Virgin get buried alive.
Yeah. The Romans had some pretty cool punishments for people that annoyed them. Corrupt officials were sewn into a bag full of badgers and thrown into the river.
Wasn't it like
badger?
Like
No,
it was a snake, like
It was a
dog,
snake,
a dog,
Yeah.
a monkey, snake, and a rooster.
Either way,
It was like
you're going to get ripped apart as you die.
yeah.
And if you're a traitor of a different kind, they'll throw you off the Tarpeian Rock. The Tarpeian Rock isn't enough to kill you quick, but it is enough to break every bone in your body. And then you lie there with every bone in your body broken and die over a period of days. The dogs come and worry at you, and there's nothing you can do because your bones are broken.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So, anyway, the Pharisees are like the Vestal Virgins for the Jews. You see, Moses' 10 Commandments are expanded into something called the Mishnah, or the Scribal Law. The Scribal Law is what Jewish leaders say the 10 Commandments means. So, for example, on the Sabbath day, you're not supposed to do any work. What does that mean? Well, in the Mishnah, they describe exactly how heavy an object needs to be before you can't lift it on the Sabbath because it would be defined as work. So you could lift a feather.
Wow.
You might be able to lift something as light as this remote control, but you would not be able to lift something like this water unless you were, drinking. You couldn't move it from place to place. You can't even light candles. So in preparation for the Sabbath, the housewife prepares food that can just be eaten, including this sort of wrapped, braided bread that you just pull off because otherwise cutting bread might be work. All the candles have to be lit because you can't light a candle on the Sabbath because it's work. So all of this is described in the Mishnah. Shh! No one can live like this. Absolutely no one can live a normal life following every rule in the Mishnah. What the Pharisees do is they follow every rule in the Mishnah. They wear special clothing. They're supported by the charitable donations of the people, for the most part, and everyone gives them honor. And nobody is a Pharisee for too long, because, again, like being a Vestal, most people do it for a few years as an act of reverence or sacrifice to God. So what they are doing is fetishizing the law, and they are living according to the letter of the law. But Pharisees are often very prideful people. I'm living according to the letter of the law. It's like if you know anyone who fasts during Lent, which is something I used to do as a Catholic, believe it or not, you're not supposed to constantly whinge about it. sorry, my bad temper. I'm fasting for Lent. I'm such a good person. It's virtue signal. So what you're supposed to do is supposed to do it in silence. You're not supposed to talk about it. You just do it as a quiet sacrifice out of dedication to God. The Pharisees did everything publicly. Jesus had a lot of nasty things to say about the Pharisees. He thought they put on a big show, but that their faith was very shallow. Yeah.
At my old school, there were a couple people who we had to have last talk with them because there's a couple people during Lent come in and they're like, "Oh, I'm so hungry, fasting, I'm fasting and I gave up this and this and this. They're so great." And our teacher had to sit us down and she's like, "This is not the meaning of Lent.
She's
the
right.
meaning is to sacrifice to bring yourself closer to God. And if you're doing it silently, you're not burdening people with your problems."
Right.
And everyone just kind of got like a big check right there.
Good. And good for your old teacher. I think I would have liked her. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe she wouldn't have liked me. That's entirely possible. Okay, so those are the Pharisees. And let's see, who else? The Scribes. The Scribes are often Sadducees, but not always. The Scribes are like the lawyers and the accountants. They're the officials among the Jews. And they have their own interests, and they usually work both with the Sadducees and with the Sanhedrin. And I guess you could also say, and I might as well just throw them in here since I'm just throwing in classes of people, you've got the aristocracy, and the aristocracy are the Jewish royalty and the Jewish noblemen. Many of them are Sadducees. In fact, all of them are. Otherwise, they would have been killed. And the last group of people, of course, that you've got in Judea during the time of Christ. Can anyone guess? The Romans.
I was going to say.
So, all of these groups don't like one another. And the first thing that comes to disturb this is John the Baptist. Repent, for the end is nigh. John irritates the aristocrats, he irritates the Sanhedrin, and he gets himself killed because he irritates the royalty. Then Jesus goes preaching. And at first, Jesus is allowed to preach in the synagogues. But quickly, the synagogues realize that Jesus is not preaching conformity. Jesus is saying new stuff. He's saying stuff that will challenge the established social order. The Sanhedrin doesn't like him because he says they're irrelevant, in effect. The Pharisees don't like him because Jesus says it's not what goes into the mouth that defiles a man. It's what comes out of your mouth. In other words, don't worry about eating kosher. What will really mess you up is gossiping or saying falsehoods, libeling somebody, slandering somebody, lying, spreading hatred. Those things are what will damn you, not eating fish or shellfish. And the Pharisees don't like that because they follow the laws. The Zealots don't like Jesus, particularly because Jesus is once asked by the priests, they're trying to set him up, hey, you're a righteous man. Oh, they start with this false praise. You're a righteous dude. Tell us, O wise and righteous holy man, should we, people of God, pay taxes to the scummy pagan Roman emperor? Now, this is intended to be a dilemma that will mess Jesus up. If Jesus says, pay your taxes, he'll be seen as a Sadducee. He'll be seen by the Zealots as an enemy. He'll probably get killed by the Zealots with daggers or stones or just getting knocked off a cliff or something because he's saying, pay the Romans. On the other hand, if Jesus says, don't pay those pagan little twerps, Those pagan little twerps will be told that Jesus is spreading sedition and insurrection, and the Romans will arrest him and kill him for spreading insurrection and sedition. Oh, they think they're so clever. Jesus' response is, somebody in the crowd, do you have a denarius? A denarius is a Roman silver piece. It's about the size of a dime. And he takes, I'll give it back. And he doesn't even have to say that. The guy just gives him the denarius. And Jesus says, okay, look at this. You know what's on this? And they say, yeah. He says, because what's on it is the face of Tiberius Caesar, the Roman emperor. Give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and give unto God what is God's. The money has Caesar's face on it. Giving Caesar his own money does not seem blasphemous. Giving God your soul, your life, your dedication, that's what God deserves. Now that answer really upsets the people that tried to set him up because it doesn't do what they wanted. Jesus says, see this money? It's already Caesar. Give unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Give unto God what is God's. So Jesus is slippery in this way. He does not allow himself to be pinioned and pilloried by a bunch of opponents. Okay. One of the times, actually more than one of the times, that Jesus heals somebody is on the Sabbath. He healed on the Sabbath! And he's challenged by this, about this. And Jesus says, if you... Actually, I don't remember exactly what he said, but the general gist is, if you had somebody that you loved that was suffering, I mean, you know what the Mishnah allows, the Scribal Law? The Scribal Law allows you to prevent somebody from getting worse, but not to help them get better on the Sabbath. You're supposed to maintain them in this nebulous twilight zone between unhealth and health until the Sabbath is over, and then you can treat their injuries. So you can staunch their bleeding, but you can't stitch them up. Yeah.
I was going to ask what happens if they're stabbed.
Yeah, well, exactly. So Jesus says, if you loved somebody, would you do that? Really? Would you yeah.
Isn't there like a guy who fell in a hole? When like get him out of the hole? He said, if like one of your sheep fell in the hole, would you pull it out?
Yeah, and of course they pull it out. You know who, by the way, couldn't do any of these Sabbath laws? Anyone who farmed or ranched. Because farmers and ranchers have animals. And the thing about cows is they don't go, oh, it's the Sabbath, I don't need to give my milk. No. They go, milk me! Not that the Jews had many cows. They also had goats. The animals need to be milked. The animals need to be fed. There are things that need to be done. And yes, animals that give milk regularly, like cows or goats, hurt if they're not milked regularly. It hurts them. So they were, farmers and ranchers and stuff were called people of the land with contempt by the priests and the scribes and the Sadducees and the Pharisees because they can't follow the law because they're too busy feeding everyone else. In any case, Jesus finally goes to Jerusalem. And people are irritated because he heals on the Sabbath, because his men enjoy partying too much. And they're criticized. Jesus spends time with whores and tax collectors. Because Jesus, well, you know, he's challenged by this. You're such a righteous man. Why do you spend time with prostitutes and tax collectors? Maybe I should have said it more genteelly than that W word. Jesus says, if I came to help people stop sinning, where should I be except among sinners? Am I going to waste my time among the righteous that don't need me? Or am I going to spend my time among the people who need me? Jesus goes to Jerusalem for Passover week. By this point, his fame is far and wide, and Jesus decides to publicly proclaim himself as the Messiah. Up until now, it's all been hidden. So he arranges for a donkey to be brought out of the city to meet him. And Jesus gets on the donkey, which people did ride. It sounds really weird, but they did. And he rides into town on the back of a donkey. This is an announcement of the Messiah. If the Messiah rides into Jerusalem on a horse, he comes with war. If the Messiah rides on the back of a donkey, he comes in peace. Because no one goes to war on the back of a donkey. Not unless they're a hobbit or a dwarf. Really. Now, as Jesus is riding in, followers and others and curious people come out, and they see this guy proclaiming that he's the Messiah by riding into town on a donkey. And they throw palm fronds in front of them, and they shout, "Save us now! Save us now!" Which is what Hosanna means. This is called Palm Sunday. It's the beginning of Holy Week, it's the Sunday before Easter. And on Palm Sunday, Jesus enters Jerusalem as a triumphant messianic king. People in a crowd shout, "Hosanna in the highest," which is "Save us now, save us now." That's what Hosanna means. And he is treated very, very well. Okay. During the week, Jesus spends time preaching and teaching and healing. And he goes to the temple. Now, the outer court of the temple, where everyone can go, is the court of the Gentiles. And in the court of the Gentiles, there are two businesses that operate. One is the animal stands that sells sacrifice animals. Now, you could bring in a pigeon or a sheep or a lamb. A sheep or a lamb. You could bring in a sacrifice animal, a dove. But if it's not from one of the approved temple stands, it's entirely possible you go all the way through to the priests and you've bought this animal and they find flaw with it. Because it's sort of a scam. If you buy from the temple vendors, they're not going to probably find fault. Because the temple vendors already pre-selected animals that have already been looked at by the priests. But if you buy from some outsider, the priests may suddenly discover that this animal is worthless, and you've just wasted your time and your money, and you've got to go buy one from the temple vendors. So there are animal sellers, and the second group of people are money changers. Now, we have money changers today. If you go to Europe, you're going to go to a bank or some kind of institution, and your dollars you're going to change a number of your dollars to euros. Why? Because they don't use dollars in Europe anymore. Or if you go to Britain, you'll change your money to pounds sterling. Or if you go to China, you'll change your money to RMB or yuan. In Japan, they use yen. So today, we still have, and if you go to Canada, I suppose sometimes they may accept American money, but often you have to change your money into Canadian dollars, which are different. So you've got all these different kinds of money in the world today, and there are money changers that are needed to convert the money. Okay. The world in Roman times uses Roman coins. The denarius is about a working man's daily wage. So it's a silver piece a day for a working man's daily wage. But there ain't no way on God's green earth that the temple priests are going to accept pagan coins with the images of pagan leaders and gods. No. Jewish law says that only shekels are acceptable in the temple. Now, a shekel is a Jewish halfpenny. It's a Jewish coin. No pagan connection at all. It's a copper piece, like a penny used to be. Pennies used to be made of copper. And then copper got so valuable that pennies really made of copper would be worth a lot more than a penny. In fact, there are people who rip copper piping out of old houses because copper is so valuable today. So how do you get your everyday money, which is used everywhere, Roman money, converted into shekels, which nobody uses? You go to the temple money changers. And there you get your denarius converted into a bunch of shekels. And you pay your temple tax, which every Jew has to do. Once a year, they have to pay a tax for everyone in their family and themselves. So they've got to have shekels to do this. So the money changers serve a useful purpose. But the Middle East. Nobody pays asking price. So at every stand, people are dickering and haggling. In the house of God, they're trying to get the best deal they can. And they're arguing over the exchange rate of shekels, or how much that particular dove should cost. And if you've ever done haggling, you understand it's not a particularly reverent activity. You're trying to be sharp, and you're trying to gain advantage, and it's very competitive. So Jesus goes to the temple, and he sees this. And he loses it. Jesus had a temper, and it came out in the temple. You have taken my Father's house and turned it into a den of thieves. And he turns over the tables of the Moneychangers, which is where they keep all their stuff. It's where they keep all their money. It's where they keep their little scales to measure the weight of coins, because coins are worth what their precious metal content is. It's where all of this delicate stuff on tables is now flung across the temple of the Gentiles. And Jesus is running riot. Now there's I think one account that has him whipping people. Yeah.
So I was about to bring that up, but he braided a whip. In one account, he braided a whip and took the time to actually braid a whip, and then went in and just started whipping to scare the animals and the people. But he didn't actually whip.
Yeah. So understand, compared to Muhammad, Jesus is a pacifist because Jesus doesn't kill anyone. He yells, he creates a disturbance. And in 3 of the 4 Gospels, this is what's going to get Jesus arrested. Because the Romans don't put up with disorder. And the temple priests don't put up with disorder. And the temple priests have their own police force. So this is really what's going to get Jesus punished. At least according to the 3 Gospels. So Jesus leaves. And he knows his time is coming. So, the night before Passover, Jesus calls his followers into a small room on the 2nd floor of a follower's house. And they're going to have a supper together, a Last Supper. And in this Last Supper, Jesus does some pretty important things. First of all, he says, tonight I'm going to be betrayed by one of you. And they all say, oh, no, no. And Peter says, no, no, no. Jesus says, you're going to betray me 3 times. And another thing Jesus does is he takes a piece of Middle Eastern flatbread and he breaks it and passes it around, and they're all holding it. And he says, this bread is my body. It will be given in sacrifice for you in remission of sins. Do this in memory of me. And he eats the bread, and they all eat the bread. And then he takes a goblet of wine and says, this is the cup of my blood. This is the new and everlasting covenant, that sins may be forgiven. Do this in memory of me. He drinks a little of the wine, and they pass it around, and they each take a sip. This is Holy Communion. It is a sacrament. It is sacred to Christians of all denominations. All Christians, to some extent, believe that Holy Communion is a special event. What's going on? Well, Roman Catholic belief was, and I think still is, that what happens is transubstantiation. Transubstantiation is when Jesus says, this is my body, and when the priest says, this is my body. The bread is converted in every way except physically into the physical body of Christ. And the wine is converted literally into, in every way but physical, into the blood of Christ. Now, when I was a kid, I was horrified by this. Because you're eating flesh and drinking blood? Even as a kid, I knew that was wrong. And this is Jesus? But what it is what communion is you are taking the Lord God Almighty into your body voluntarily. A wise person will confess their sins beforehand to be in a state of grace so that they can receive God into themselves without genuine hypocrisy. You take the body, in some denominations you also take some grape juice or some wine and the blood. And what you are doing is saying, God, inhabit me. God, revitalize me. God, make me a new man, if you're a man. You are taking God into you in a physical way. And this is considered a holy ritual, a transcendent thing, a spiritual mystery. So this happens on the night of the Last Supper. And after this, Judas leaves to go betray Jesus to the priests for 30 pieces of silver. And Jesus retreats to a rich man's garden, the Garden of Gethsemane, which is near Jerusalem. It's a walled-off garden. Rich people have gardens near the city. Not in the city, because the city is walled. Everything's dense. But outside the city is this beautiful garden. Jesus and his followers are allowed into it. They're given the key. So Jesus and his followers are in the garden. And Jesus says to his closest followers, I'm going to stay up and pray for a while. Will you stay up with me so that when I come back we can talk? And they say, yeah, sure. And Jesus goes off. Look, whether or not you are a Christian, whether or not you believe in the resurrection or not, doesn't matter. Jesus knew they were coming now. Had he wanted to, even if he wasn't a God, he could have fled. Getting away in the ancient world is a lot easier than it is today because they don't have face recognition technology. They don't have cameras, they don't have IDs, they don't have radios. Jesus could have escaped. Now, he might have escaped for good or he might have escaped for a few hours, but he could have run. He didn't run. He stayed there knowing they were coming for him. To me, that courage is worthy of deep respect. But he prays to God like any human being would. He's 33. He is at the peak of life. He's still young enough to enjoy life without pain, without compromise, without medication, without failing health. But he's old enough to be wise. 33 is like the perfect age for a man in the ancient world. And he's about to die. And he knows it. So he prays to God, God, if there's another way, if there is any other way to have your will be done, please, Lord. But in the end, your will, not mine. And that's important. In the end, your will, not mine. Your will be done. So Jesus, while he desperately wants to stay alive, because he's not a robot. He's not some cartoon character. He's a man. He's only got one life on this world. But in the end, he says, God, your will, not mine. And he comes back, and all of his guys are asleep. He wakes them up and says, come on. Can't you just stay up with me a little while longer? And they say, oh, okay, sure. I'm going to go pray, and I'll come back, and we'll talk. Same thing happens. Eventually, everyone has drifted off, and Judas comes, and the temple priests' police are with him. And to single Jesus out, when Jesus stands, Judas kisses him, which is kiss of peace, something that they do. And Jesus looks him in the eye and says, Judas, will you betray me with a kiss? And then he's arrested. Now, in one of the stories, there's a fight, there's a scuffle. Peter grabs a sword and cuts off the ear of one of the temple priest's police. And Jesus says, stop, and takes the ear and places it on the man's head properly and heals the man. If he who lives by the sword will die by the sword.
Sure, right.
Dan, this is why you are probably not going to be a magical healer, because you have too much of a sense of humor. So Jesus is arrested. He's brought to Caiaphas' house. And he's put on trial. This is where Peter denies him 3 times. And it's from Caiaphas' house that Jesus is brought to Pilate. And that's where what Dan read it comes to. So there, I told you more of the story, and tomorrow we'll do Gospel of John, and then we'll see some movie clips. Which I already told you about. You don't need to react.
I'm just so excited about movie clips.
Yeah. Any questions, comments, or thoughts? Thanks to those of you who offered ideas. Bye.